The massive Zthor ship loomed over the much smaller human vessel. From the viewing deck of the USS Endeavour, Linda Mitchell watched with wide eyes as the alien craft's docking tube extended toward them. At 19 years old, she never imagined she would represent humanity in its first face-to-face meeting with an alien civilization. "Remember, smile, but don't show your teeth," said Admiral Gregory Walsh, standing beside her in his crisp Navy uniform. Their cultural briefing said they might see it as a threat. Linda nodded, smoothing down her formal blue dress. She wasn't a diplomat or a soldier, just an art student from Ohio who had won a global lottery. The United Earth Council had decided that their delegation should include an ordinary citizen, someone who represented the hopeful future of humanity. "I still can't believe I'm here," Linda whispered. Admiral Walsh gave her a reassuring smile. "That's exactly why you're perfect for this. Your wonder, your openness, that's what we want to share with the Zthor." The delegation consisted of 5 humans, Admiral Walsh as military liaison, Linda as Earth's civilian representative, veteran negotiator Olivia Harper in her tailored suit, xenobiologist Alan Rodriguez with his curious eyes constantly scanning everything, and communications specialist Samantha Wright, whose implants allowed her to process and translate alien language patterns in real time. The docking tube sealed with a hiss and the airlock door slid open. The first glimpse of the Zthor made Linda gasp softly. They stood nearly 8 feet tall, with iridescent scales covering muscular bodies. Their forearms ended in 3-fingered hands and their faces featured vertical slit pupils and gold eyes. High Commander Vraxel stepped forward, his ceremonial armor gleaming under the lights. The metal plates clinked as he moved, adorned with symbols that Samantha had explained represented his conquests. "The Zthor Empire welcomes the representatives of Earth," Vraxel said, his words translated through the delegation's earpieces. "You stand in the presence of a civilization that has brought order to 17 star systems." Admiral Walsh bowed slightly. "Earth thanks you for this historic meeting. We come seeking friendship and knowledge." Linda noticed how the alien crew behind Vraxel kept their eyes downcast, never looking directly at their commander. The briefing materials had mentioned the Zthor's strict hierarchy, but seeing it in person made her uncomfortable. The tour of the Zthor vessel was being broadcast live across Earth and throughout the Zthor Empire. Floating camera drones followed the delegation, capturing every moment of this historic first contact. "This is our command center," Vraxel announced as they entered a vast room filled with holographic displays. Lesser-ranked Zthor scrambled to bow as he entered. "From here, we coordinate the movements of 2,000 warships." "Impressive," said Olivia Harper diplomatically. "Earth has focused more on exploration vessels, though we maintain defensive capabilities." Vraxel made a sound that the translators interpreted as dismissive. "Defense is for the weak. The strong expand. It is the law of the universe." Linda noticed a large display showing various alien species. Each image was connected to star systems with blinking dots. "Are these other civilizations you've met?" she asked, genuine curiosity in her voice. The command center went silent. Vraxel turned slowly to face her, his gold eyes narrowing. "You address me directly, little one," he said, his voice suddenly cold. Admiral Walsh stepped forward smoothly. "Commander, please forgive any breach of protocol. We're still learning your customs." But Linda, not understanding the danger, continued. "I'm just curious about these other species. On Earth, we have thousands of cultures. Do all these different aliens live together in your empire?" One of the Zthor officers visibly flinched at her questions. Samantha Wright tried to catch Linda's eye, subtly shaking her head in warning. "They exist to serve," Vraxel said flatly, "as all lesser beings should." The tension in the room thickened. Linda felt it but didn't understand its source. Her natural friendliness pushed her forward. "Maybe we could learn from each other," she suggested with a warm smile. "Cultural exchange is so important. At my university, we study." "Enough." Vraxel's voice boomed through the command center. "This subordinate speaks out of turn and questions the natural order." Alan Rodriguez stepped closer to Linda protectively. "There seems to be a misunderstanding," In human culture, asking questions is a sign of respect and interest. Vraxel's upper arms raised in a gesture the humans hadn't seen before. The other Zthor in the room immediately backed away. In 17 conquered systems, all beings understand their place, he said. You humans will learn yours. Admiral Walsh sensed the dangerous shift. Commander, perhaps we should continue this discussion in a more formal setting. Our diplomatic team has prepared. Diplomatic? Vraxel interrupted. You bring this untrained female to question me before my officers? Before the eyes of the Empire? He gestured to the hovering camera drone still broadcasting everything. Linda finally realized her mistake. I'm sorry if I offended you. That wasn't my intention at all. Intention is irrelevant. Only order matters. Vraxel turned to his guards. The Empire must see what happens to those who disrespect the natural hierarchy. Everything happened. Too quickly. The guards moved forward. Admiral Walsh shouted, "No!" and reached for Linda. Olivia Harper began reciting diplomatic immunity protocols. Samantha Wright frantically tried to communicate that this was a cultural misunderstanding. Linda stood frozen, confusion giving way to fear as the guards surrounded her. Please, she said, her voice small. I just wanted to learn about you. Then let your species learn this lesson, Vraxel said, raising his hand. The command was simple. The execution was swift. The camera drones captured everything as Linda Mitchell, art student from Ohio, became the first human to die at alien hands. The broadcast continued as her body crumpled to the floor. It captured Admiral Walsh's roar of rage, restrained by 4 Zthor guards. It showed Alan Rodriguez dropping to his knees beside Linda, uselessly checking for a pulse. It recorded Olivia Harper's face transforming from diplomatic calm to cold fury. And most importantly, it transmitted Vraxel's final words to both Earth and his empire. Let all species know their place. The strong command, the weak obey. That is the only law among the stars. The cameras kept rolling as the human delegation was permitted to gather Linda's body. No one spoke as they carried her back to their ship. No tears fell yet. Those would come later. In their eyes was something the Zthor had never seen and did not recognize. It was the look of humans who would never forgive and never forget. The Zthor Empire had just made the worst mistake in its 1,000-year history. They had killed a human girl on live broadcast. They just didn't know it yet. The USS Endeavour returned to Earth orbit 7 days after Linda Mitchell's death. The ship moved slowly, as if weighed down by grief. Inside, the crew had draped Linda's body in an Earth flag. No one had spoken much during the journey home. On Earth, billions of people had watched the broadcast. They saw Linda's innocent questions. They saw the Zthor commander's rage. They saw her die. For the first time in history, all of humanity shared the same emotion, a deep, burning anger. President Catherine Monroe stood before the United Nations General Assembly. Her normally perfect hair was slightly out of place, her eyes red from crying and lack of sleep. The chamber was completely silent as she took the podium. Today we bring Linda Mitchell home, she said, her voice steady despite her appearance. An innocent young woman who represented the best of us. Curious, open-hearted, hopeful about our place among the stars. The massive screens behind her showed Linda's smiling face from her lottery selection video. The Zthor Empire believed they were teaching us a lesson about power, President Monroe continued. They were correct, but not in the way they intended. They have taught us that we cannot afford to be naive. They have shown us that there are forces in this universe that mistake kindness for weakness. She gripped the sides of the podium tightly. I hereby announce what will be known as the Mitchell Doctrine. We will not rest until justice is served. Humanity will not bow to tyranny, not now, not ever. The assembly erupted in unified applause. Nations that had been enemies for centuries stood together. Outside the Zthor embassy in Geneva, thousands of people gathered. They didn't scream or throw things. They simply stood in silence holding images of Linda. The Zthor diplomats inside grew increasingly nervous as the crowd grew larger by the hour. General Peter Lewis of Earth Defense Forces called an emergency meeting with his Swiss counterpart. "We need to get the Zthor diplomats safely to their ship," he said. The Swiss general looked surprised. "After what they did, the people want blood." General Lewis shook his head. "We are not them. We don't kill diplomats. Ever." Within hours, a protected corridor was established. The Zthor diplomats, expecting to be torn apart by the crowd, were shocked when they were safely escorted to their shuttle. Not a single human tried to harm them. As their ship broke Earth's atmosphere, Ambassador Kexril sent a message to High Commander Vraxel. "The humans show weakness. They did not even attempt revenge. They are not a threat." Meanwhile, in a secure facility beneath the Rocky Mountains, Richard Daniels sat across from President Monroe. At 62, Daniels had retired from military service years ago. His weathered face showed his surprise at being called back. "You want me to lead our response?" he asked. "Madam President, I expected you to call on someone younger." "I need someone who understands that the greatest victories don't always come from the biggest guns," she replied. "The public expects us to build warships and strike back. We will do neither. At least, not in the way anyone expects." Daniels nodded slowly. "What did you have in mind?" "Operation Quiet Storm," she said, sliding a tablet across the table. "We have 3 advantages the Zthor don't know about. First, we've been studying their communication protocols since first contact. Second, they've completely underestimated us. And third," she paused, "third, we aren't alone in disliking the Zthor Empire." Daniels reviewed the plan on the tablet. "This is ambitious. Some would say it's not aggressive enough." "Linda, Mitchell wasn't aggressive," President Monroe said softly, "but her death will change the galaxy." 2 weeks later, a small unmarked ship slipped through the border defenses of the Zthor Empire. On board were Heather Martinez and Kyle Bennett, both former intelligence operatives. Their mission wasn't to kill or destroy, it was to listen and learn. They landed on Vexar, a mining world where the insect-like Mirosi labored under Zthor overseers. Disguised as traitors, Heather and Kyle made contact with Mirosi resistance leaders. "We don't seek to replace the Zthor as rulers," Heather told them in a secret underground meeting. "We want all species to determine their own futures." The Mirosi were suspicious. Pretty words. Many have said similar things before becoming new masters. Kyle projected a recording of Linda's death. "This is what brought us here. One life. That's how much each human matters to us. How much does each Mirosi life matter to you?" The Mirosi leaders clicked their mandibles in their version of solemn agreement. "Each clutch member is sacred. The Zthor never understood this." "Then we already share more with each other than either of us shares with them," Heather said. "We don't want your resources. We want your knowledge of Zthor systems, communications, and weaknesses." By the time Heather and Kyle left Vexar, they carried with them detailed information about the Zthor command structure. Similar missions to other conquered worlds followed. Each time the humans brought the same message: "We do not seek to conquer, we seek to free." Back on Earth, factories that had once made cars now produced specialized communication devices. Research universities shifted focus to understanding the psychology and sociology of hierarchical species. Military training centers taught soldiers how to fight without firing a shot. The Zthor noticed none of this. Their spies reported that Earth was building no warships, developing no new weapons. High Commander Vraxel was pleased. "They mourn but do not act," he told his generals. "Perhaps humans are natural servants after all." To test this theory, 6 months after Linda's death, Vraxel ordered a Zthor battlecruiser to approach Earth's colony on Mars. The expected response was submission or futile resistance. Instead, the humans simply evacuated the colony before the battlecruiser arrived. The Zthor captain found an empty settlement and declared victory. As his ship left Mars orbit, he didn't notice the tiny probe that attached itself to his vessels. 3 weeks later, As President Monroe met again with Richard Daniels, a message arrived from Dr. Nicole Foster at the Asymmetric Warfare Division. Phase 1 complete, it read. Cultural malware deployed throughout their communication network. Ready to begin Phase 2 on your command. President Monroe looked at Daniels. Do you think Linda would approve of what we're doing? Daniels considered the question carefully. She tried to understand them. She showed respect. She wanted cultural exchange. He paused. We're giving the Zthor exactly what she wanted, just not how they expected it. Begin Phase 2, President Monroe ordered. Across the galaxy on 17 conquered worlds, the invisible weapon began its work. The empire that had killed a human girl on live broadcast had just begun to collapse. They just didn't know it yet. The Zthor battleship Eternal Dominance drifted helplessly in space. Inside, Commander Zthor stared at his communication screen in confusion. 3 different orders had arrived within minutes of each other. The first ordered him to attack the human outpost on Europa. The second commanded him to return to the Zthor homeworld immediately. The third instructed his ship to join the defense of a mining colony in the opposite direction. All 3 messages carried the authentication codes of High Command. In Zthor society, questioning a superior's orders was punishable by death, but following all 3 was impossible. What should we do, Commander? His second-in-command asked, nervously. Zthor had no answer. Across the Zthor Empire, similar scenes played out on hundreds of ships and bases. Orders contradicted each other. Supply ships arrived at colonies with the wrong supplies. Military units were deployed to empty spaces while actual threats went unaddressed. No one dared question these orders. The rigid hierarchy that had made the Zthor Empire strong now became its greatest weakness. In her lab beneath MIT, Dr. Nicole Foster watched the chaos unfold on multiple screens. A small smile played across her lips as data streamed in from hidden probes throughout Zthor territory. Cultural malware functioning at 93% efficiency, she reported to Richard Daniels, who stood behind her. Their communication system still works perfectly, but the content is being subtly altered before delivery. Daniels nodded. And they can't fix what they don't know is broken. Exactly, Dr. Foster replied. In their society, subordinates don't question orders from above. So when contradictory commands arrive, their entire system freezes up. No one wants to ask for clarification because that would suggest their superiors made a mistake. How long before they realize what's happening? Daniels asked. Dr. Foster shrugged. Could be months. Their entire cultural system works against them figuring it out. Each level of their hierarchy will blame the levels below for improper execution, rather than considering the orders themselves might be compromised. Meanwhile, across the galaxy, human diplomatic ships made contact with various species under Zthor rule. On the water world of Thalassa, home to the aquatic Mirosi, Ambassador Julie Carter met with tribal leaders beneath the waves in special breathing suits. We've seen the Zthor become confused and disorganized, said Elder Vakal, her fins rippling in the current. Their overseers give conflicting commands. Some days no commands come at all. It's happening throughout their empire, Julie explained, and it gives us all an opportunity. For what? Revenge? Vakal asked. Julie shook her head. For freedom. Humanity doesn't want to replace the Zthor as your rulers. We want all intelligent species to govern themselves. She showed them recordings of Earth's nations, different but united. She explained concepts of self-determination and mutual defense. Similar conversations happened on 17 worlds. The story of Linda Mitchell spread among the subjugated species. Not as a tale of human weakness as the Zthor had intended, but as evidence of human values, of a species that considered each life precious, regardless of status. High Commander Vraxel finally realized something was wrong when 3 separate fleets failed to arrive for a military parade. Furious, he executed their commanders for disobedience, but the problems only grew worse. Our communications must be compromised, suggested his intelligence chief, risking his life to speak up. Impossible, Vraxel dismissed the idea. No species in the Empire has technology superior to ours, especially not those weak humans. As if in answer to his words, alarms blared throughout his palace. On the display screens, a human fleet appeared at the edge of the Proxima Centauri system, where a key Zthor military base was located. At last, Vraxel smiled cruelly. Now they show their true intentions. Now we can crush them properly. He ordered the immediate deployment of the 3 warships stationed at Proxima Centauri. But when the base commander received the order, it appeared to instruct him to disable his weapon systems for routine maintenance instead. The human fleet was led by Captain Stephen Phillips aboard the USS Defiance. Unlike the massive, heavily armed Zthor ships, the human vessels were smaller and appeared lightly armed. They moved in strange patterns, seemingly random but actually carefully choreographed. "The Zthor ships are powering down their weapons," reported his tactical officer with surprise. "They're opening communications." On the main screen, the confused face of the Zthor base commander appeared. "We received orders to stand down for maintenance. Is this some new peace agreement?" Phillips kept his expression neutral. "We're here to oversee the transition of this system according to the new directive." "What new directive?" the commander asked, growing suspicious. "The one sent from High Command 3 days ago," Phillips said confidently. "Perhaps your communication systems are experiencing difficulties." The Zthor commander faced an impossible choice: admit he had not received such orders, suggesting either incompetence or a breakdown in their vaunted communication system, or pretend he knew what the human was talking about and risk following false orders. Fear of appearing ignorant won out. "Of course. The new directive. Please proceed." Within hours, the human fleet had peacefully captured 3 Zthor warships and secured the entire system without firing a shot. When news reached High Commander Vraxel, he executed the messenger. Then he ordered an immediate attack on Earth itself. He would make an example of the human homeworld just as he had made an example of that human girl. But when his orders went out, they became garbled. Some ships received instructions to attack Earth. Others were told to defend the Zthor homeworld against a non-existent human invasion. Still others received orders to quell rebellions on mining planets where no rebellions yet existed, though the orders themselves soon sparked them. On Earth, President Monroe met with the families of Linda, Mitchell. Frank and Maria Mitchell sat quietly in the Oval Office as she explained what was happening. "The Zthor are collapsing from within," she told them. "Not from bombs or bullets, but from the very values Linda represented: openness, communication, respect for all lives." Frank Mitchell, a construction worker with rough hands and a gentle voice, looked up at the president. "Will there be more killing?" "We're doing everything possible to minimize casualties," President Monroe promised. "Our goal isn't revenge. It's to ensure no other family ever experiences what yours has." Maria Mitchell wiped away a tear. Linda would have liked that. She never believed in fighting. She believed in understanding. "That's exactly what we're using against them," President Monroe said softly. "Understanding their culture better than they understand ours." As they spoke, on 17 worlds across the galaxy, the subjugated species began their carefully coordinated uprisings, not with violence but with simple refusal. Refusal to follow conflicting orders. Refusal to mine resources. Refusal to fight their neighbors. The invisible weapon had done its work. Phase 3 was about to begin. The empire that had killed a human girl was starting to crumble from within. 3 years had passed since Linda Mitchell's death. On the water world of Thalassa, Elder Vakal swam to the surface and emerged beside a floating platform where human and phalanx representatives waited. The phalanx were silicon-based beings who looked like walking crystals glittering in the triple suns of the Thalassan system. "Today we declare our independence from the Zthor Empire," Elder Vakal announced, her voice translated through devices developed by Earth scientists. "The Mirosi people will no longer mine sea crystals for Zthor weapons." Ambassador Julie Carter nodded. "Earth recognizes the sovereignty of Thalassa. We offer our continued protection until your defenses are established." The Phalanx representative, a crystalline figure named Shimmer, stepped forward. As do we. Our ships will join the human fleet to guard your world. This scene repeated across the former empire. One by one, subjugated worlds declared independence. The Zthor response was inconsistent and disorganized, thanks to the continuing effects of the cultural malware. On some worlds, Zthor commanders surrendered without fighting when faced with combined forces of humans and former slave species. On others, they fought briefly before their own warrior castes refused orders to fire on civilians. High Commander Vraxel watched his empire crumble from his palace on the Zthor homeworld. His scales had dulled with stress, and his once proud posture had become hunched. 3 years of failure had taken their toll. "Bring me General Kravzak," he ordered a nervous aide. When the general arrived, Vraxel didn't waste time. "The humans have turned our subjects against us." "How?" "They have no military might to match ours. Their ships are smaller, fewer." General Kravzak hesitated before speaking. In normal times, suggesting the High Commander had made an error would mean death. But these were not normal times. "Perhaps, High Commander, we misunderstood them from the beginning," he said carefully. "When we executed that human female—" "The Mitchell girl," Vraxel interrupted. "I remember her name now. Every subject race chants it during their rebellions." "Yes, when we killed her, we expected fear and submission from humanity. Instead, they responded with patience." Vraxel growled. "They responded with trickery and sabotage. They corrupted our communication systems." "That is true," the general acknowledged. "But have you considered why they chose that approach rather than direct combat?" Before Vraxel could answer, the palace shook with a distant explosion. On the security screens, they could see crowds gathering in the capital city. Not humans, their own people. Lower castes of Zthor society, inspired by the rebellions on other worlds. "This is impossible," Vraxel whispered. "Our own kind would never rebel." "They have been watching the broadcasts," General Kravzak explained. "The humans have been sharing information freely among all peoples of the former empire. Ideas about equality, self-determination. Dangerous ideas," Vraxel snarled. "Perhaps, but effective ones." Vraxel turned to his communication panel. "We will address the Empire, show them our strength once more." He activated the broadcast system that would transmit his image across all Zthor territories. "Loyal subjects of the Empire," he began. "These rebellions must end. Remember your place in the natural order. To demonstrate our resolve, we will execute 100 members of each rebellious species." He gestured to his guards to bring in the first group of prisoners, but the guards didn't move. "Obey me," Vraxel shouted. The head guard looked at his companions, then back at the High Commander. "We received orders to stand down," he said. "From whom?" "I am your High Commander." "The orders carried your authentication code," the guard replied. "But they contradicted your spoken command. We must verify." For the first time in the 1,000-year history of the Zthor Empire, a subordinate had questioned a direct order from the High Commander. On Earth, in a university auditorium, Frank and Maria Mitchell addressed representatives from 30 former Zthor subject worlds. Despite being simple people with no diplomatic training, they had become powerful symbols of humanity's approach to interspecies relations. "Our daughter believed in understanding others," Frank said, his voice carrying across the diverse audience. "She asked questions because she was curious, not because she wanted to challenge authority." Maria continued, "In her memory, we ask all of you not to seek revenge against the Zthor people. Many of them were trapped in the same system that took our daughter." The alien representatives listened respectfully. Among them was a young Zthor female named Liz TV, who had fled the homeworld after joining the reform movement. "On my world," she said when invited to speak, "we were taught that questioning superiors showed weakness. Now we understand it shows wisdom. The ability to challenge ideas makes them stronger, not weaker." Meanwhile, the economic system that had sustained the Zthor Empire began to collapse. Without slave labor from conquered worlds, their production faltered. Without strict hierarchy, their distribution networks fell apart. Human advisors worked with former subject species to establish new trade agreements. These were based not on domination but on mutual benefit. Minerals from one world were traded for technology from another. Food from fertile planets reached barren ones in exchange for manufactured goods. Richard Daniels, now serving as Earth's Minister of Interstellar Relations, met with President Monroe to discuss the transformation. "It's working better than we anticipated," he reported. 17 independent worlds have joined what they're calling the Galactic Cooperative. They've invited Earth to become a founding member. President Monroe smiled. "And the Zthor? Their homeworld is in turmoil. Civil conflict has broken out between traditionalists and reformers. High Commander Vraxel is trying to maintain control, but..." He was interrupted by an urgent message. On the screen, they saw a live broadcast from the Zthor capital. High Commander Vraxel stood in his palace, surrounded by his own guards. Their weapons were pointed at him, not to protect him. "This is for Linda Mitchell," said the lead guard, before giving the execution order. The broadcast cut off abruptly. President Monroe closed her eyes. "I didn't want it to end this way," she said softly. "Revenge wasn't the goal." "It wasn't our doing," Daniels reminded her. "His own people chose this. They've been watching us for 3 years, learning different ways to structure a society." That evening, as news of Vraxel's death spread across Earth, people gathered in parks and public squares. They didn't celebrate. Instead, they lit candles for Linda Mitchell, whose innocent questions had sparked a revolution of ideas that brought down an empire. In space, human ships and vessels from former subject worlds began a new mission, bringing humanitarian aid to the Zthor homeworld, where centuries of rigid hierarchy were giving way to painful but necessary change. The empire that had killed a human girl was gone. In its place, something new was being born. 5 years had passed since Linda Mitchell's death. The galaxy had changed in ways no one could have predicted. Where once the Zthor Empire had ruled through fear and rigid hierarchy, now the Galactic Cooperative brought together 23 independent worlds with Earth as an equal member. On Mars, the Linda Mitchell Space Academy opened its doors to students from all member species. The building was circular, with no high or low positions. Everyone met as equals. Above the main entrance, a simple quote, "One life can change the universe." Admiral Gregory Walsh, now retired with gray hair and deeper wrinkles, walked slowly through the academy halls. He had aged considerably in 5 years, carrying the weight of having watched Linda die under his protection. Today was his first visit to the academy named in her honor. A young Mirosi student approached him, her fins quivering with excitement. "Admiral Walsh, we studied your first contact mission in history class. It's an honor to meet you." Walsh smiled gently. "The honor is mine. What are you studying here?" "Diplomatic communications and cultural exchange," she replied. "I want to ensure no misunderstandings ever lead to tragedy again." Walsh nodded. Linda would have liked that very much. Across the solar system on Europa, Richard Daniels met with representatives from all cooperative worlds. The former military strategist had become the architect of a new approach to interstellar relations. "The 5-year review of the cooperative charter is now complete," he announced to the assembled delegates. "All member worlds have reaffirmed their commitment to mutual defense, open communication, and respectful exchange." Among the delegates sat Lissy TV, now serving as the representative of the reformed Zthor Republic. After civil war and painful restructuring, a portion of the former Zthor homeworld had embraced change. The old hierarchical system had been replaced with elected councils where questioning and debate were encouraged, not punished. "My people wish to express our continuing regret for past actions," Lissa TV said, her voice steady. "The annual Linda Mitchell Memorial Prize has been fully funded by our world for the next century. The prize recognized individuals from any species who advanced peaceful relations between different cultures. Its first recipient had been Dr. Nicole Foster, whose cultural malware had helped bring down an empire without massive bloodshed. On Earth, in a small Ohio town, Frank and Maria Mitchell tended a garden behind their modest home. although they could have lived anywhere after receiving honors from grateful worlds across the galaxy. They chose to stay where Linda had grown up. The garden included plants from 17 different worlds, all thriving together in specially designed environments. It had become something of a tourist attraction, with visitors from across Earth and beyond coming to see the living memorial. Frank looked up from his work as a shadow fell across the garden. A tall Zthor male stood at the gate, his scales dulled with age, his posture hesitant. "My name is Zareth," the visitor said quietly. "I was fleet commander under High Commander Vraxel." Maria Mitchell stood, wiping soil from her hands. "We know who you are." The former commander lowered his forearms in a gesture of submission. "I have come to seek your forgiveness, though I deserve none. I was present when your daughter died. I did nothing to stop it." Frank and Maria exchanged glances. They had met many former Zthor officials over the years, but never one so high. In the previous regime. "Why now?" Frank asked. "It's been 5 years." "I have been traveling to all worlds formerly under our control," Zareth explained, "learning from those we once ruled. I saved your world for last because the debt here is greatest." "And what have you learned?" Maria asked. "That power built on fear cannot last. That a society which cannot question itself cannot improve." He paused. "That one life, your daughter's life, held more strength than our entire empire." Frank gestured to a garden bench. "Sit with us. Tell us about your journey." This simple act, inviting a former enemy to sit as an equal, represented everything the new galactic order stood for. On the former Zthor homeworld, a museum stood on the site where the Imperial Palace had once dominated the skyline. Inside, visitors walked through exhibits showing artifacts from all species that had once been forced to serve the Empire. The central chamber held a small display. A simple blue dress like the one Linda had worn, a painting she had made as an art student, and excerpts from her application to the Earth Delegation Lottery. "I want to meet aliens because I believe different perspectives make us better," she had written. "I have so many questions about how they see the universe." President Catherine Monroe, now in her second term, visited the museum on the 5th anniversary of Linda's death. Walking beside her was the new leader of the reformed Zthor Republic, Supreme Counselor Tekval. "Your people have changed remarkably in 5 years," she noted as they moved through the quiet halls. "We had to," he replied simply. "We saw a better way." They stopped before a large view screen showing constantly updated figures, trade statistics between member worlds, educational exchanges, joint scientific achievements, numbers that represented cooperation rather than conquest. "Was it worth it?" Tekval asked suddenly. "The fall of our empire brought chaos to many worlds. Some of our people still resist the new way. Was the price worth paying?" President Monroe considered her answer carefully. "That's not for me to say. Linda's death was a tragedy, not a calculated sacrifice. What followed came from how your empire responded to our response." She paused. "But I believe she would be proud of what has grown from that terrible moment." As they spoke, their conversation was being broadcast, voluntarily and with full transparency, to all member worlds of the cooperative, not as propaganda, but as part of the new commitment to open communication. In a classroom on a distant world, young beings of 7 different species watched the broadcast. Their teacher, a former Zthor warrior who had laid down his weapons to become an educator, explained, "This is why we study history, to learn how small moments can change everything, how one life can matter more than an entire fleet of warships." A student raised a limb to ask a question. Without hesitation, the teacher acknowledged them. The simple act that Linda Mitchell had died for, now normal throughout the galaxy. Why did they kill her just for asking questions? Because, the teacher said gently, they didn't understand that true strength comes from listening, not silencing. It was their greatest mistake, and our greatest lesson. Across 23 worlds, beings of all kinds looked up at the stars that night. The Empire was gone. Something better had taken its place. all because they killed a human girl on live broadcast, and her people responded not with revenge, but with revolutionary ideas.